Hello. We're continuing today with questions regarding the preliminary contract issue when you're buying a new condo. We are talking today more about financial issues and some additional documents that you should verify all together with the preliminary contract. Usually they should have attached. We've mentioned already in the previous video that the price that you have agreed upon might differ at the end. And of course, in the preliminary contract, you should look for indications of the limits of such a price increase. Usually it's increase. And what are the criteria that allow the seller to go with this kind of price increase, and what are the limits, and there should be limits. Also, there is a question of your deposit, because normally, unfortunately, but that's the way, the developer is collecting money from the buyers in advance to just finance the activity. Normally the activity, we hope that it's the activity of construction of your particular condo, the building with your condos. And then, as you can understand, it's not impossible, it's not inconceivable that the deposits will be used for some other purpose. Maybe just to refinance or pay some debts from the previous, maybe failing projects or something like that. And that's something you would prefer to avoid. So it's preferable if the preliminary contract strictly describes the purpose of the use of the deposits, and the misuse of them, the wrong use of them, could be then used by you yourself as a legal argument in case if there is any trouble, showing that the contract was breached, and therefore you might get at least some of your money back, maybe even the whole amount. As you again can understand, the seller, the developer might go bankrupt, either for some force majeure situation, like act of God, or even it might be preconceived. We do not want it, we do not like it, but we cannot deny that it's possible. So again, what happens in such a situation? What's your protection? It's true that since quite a recent time, the newly amended Civil Code of Quebec provides for some protection of your deposit, and there are various ways to go with it. And usually the construction company prefers the way which does not guarantee any protection of the whole amount you pay as a deposit, but usually to a certain extent, usually quite low extent. And that kind of a protection is not complete, is not satisfactory. But if you think that your money is protected, if you do not go deeper, you might even miss the fact that in case of some particularly unfortunate development, you could not get what you have paid back. And if you knew about that, if you knew that there was a cap, probably you would negotiate the amount of the deposit that was asked from you, so that what you pay would not go beyond the amount that is more or less guaranteed by the way the construction company used. Now about the documents to be added, and one of them, it's almost as important as the preliminary contract itself, is the so-called note d'information, or memorandum in English, which usually gives you more information about those who will be actually doing the construction. The co-ownership declaration, which is the Déclaration de copropriété, which will be the constitution of the building, the rule of the building, and importantly, somewhere there you will see who makes decisions about the contingency funds, about the fees and payments collected from the condo owners, because all that information will show you how sufficiently or insufficiently you are protected from additional payments imposed by the developer. Because at the beginning, the developer, usually, or at least the seller company, is the owner, so they have like evidently majority of votes, and as long as they have, they theoretically, of course there are protection mechanisms, but theoretically they might impose some additional payments to be collected from the owners. And well, not to mention that there are other administrative decisions which might be imposed. So it's best to understand like what's going on, what's the actual current obligations under those documents, because only when the new owners become the majority, there will be a possibility to change that document. Sometimes that document is not even some shrewdly or by use of some evil mind, just construed to the detriment of the owners. Very often it's just a very negligently put document just to have some. Sometimes they don't even have it, and that might tell you something about the way the whole thing is organized. So you'll have to see the declaration of ownership. And if, as very often, it's only in French and you do not speak French, again, don't accept some verbal explanations. Go somewhere, see somebody who could tell you exactly what's in the document. It's not absolutely necessary that the contract project is endorsed by some recognized organization, but it might bring you some relief. But again, it's not the guarantee that the contract is just great and it's in your favor. But at least it's some point to start with, and if the contract is not endorsed and if it's just a very small and strange piece of paper, then you might have thought of a just greater caution in a situation. So what's in the memorandum? It should show you the names of the responsible architects, engineers, constructors, promoters. So to give you the information, to look around, to collect additional information about those people, those companies, to verify if they were involved in some other projects, if those projects were or were not successfully finished, if they had or didn't have some problems on the go or after, either legal problems or the problems of material kind or some like defects or so on and so on and so on. You will, in that memorandum, you will see the plan of the entire building to be constructed, because very often it's not like fully dedicated to residential couples or families or owners. Sometimes a part of it is a commercial building and a part of it is residential, or some floors, or maybe there are some separate buildings but connected somehow. So you'll have better understanding. And very often, again, once the residential part is more or less finished, and you are expected to pay and move in, the commercial part is still under construction, so you could expect several years of noise and nuisance around, because the construction of the whole project will continue, and maybe in the beginning you'll have a very nice view from your window, but knowing that later on there will be a skyscraper built right in front of your building, you will understand better the future value of the property you're buying. Also, again, in that memorandum, you will see, or you should see, better information about the materials to be used, about small details of what would be there in your particular condo or in the whole building, so that later, if there is a discrepancy, you might have a claim at least, or you might negotiate that whatever is replaced with not just cheap or low quality thing, but with something that would be still satisfactory to you. Again, unfortunately, many buyers just finish their inquiries with information about their future condo, but what will be around there, particularly what will be around there that might be of a nuisance, or like a cause of a potential problem later on. That thing you might see in the information about the common spaces, because as you know, the condo building, even if it's completely residential, it is created with pieces of private property like condos, and the common spaces, staircases, corridors, balconies, the outer walls, and so on, which will be maintained by the syndicate of the condo, and for that maintenance you will be liable to pay money. And the greater the common spaces, the more developed the common spaces, they might be even some kind of workout space, or they might be laundry room, they might be cafeteria or something like that, not to mention elevators and so on and so on. So the more of that, the higher probably will be your fees to maintain all that, your share in the fees to maintain all that. Not to mention that maybe something was promised to you and then you don't see it in the information about the common spaces. And again, that might be the foundation for some questions to ask before you sign. You will see, or you should see, who is managing the building, who will be managing the building, at least before the first general assembly of the new owners. What will be the budget? Again, that would be an indication of the fees that you probably might be responsible to pay. If there are any regulations, for example, you have a dog and you didn't see that in the regulations you're prohibited from having a dog, well, that's the stupid example, but that's something that you should think of. Also, if there are some servitudes, meaning some rights allocated to some other companies, people, owners, whoever. For example, there might be a right for some other company to use some walls, even just to cover some windows with their advertising, or some truck company to go through the yard, for example, because there is no other way or other passage. Or maybe sometimes it even happens that the land the building was constructed upon did not belong to the seller. It might belong to somebody else and only given to the seller, and then later to those who are living in the building for a limited period of time, and like 50 years, 100 years, 30 years. And then you can imagine what kind of legal trouble will be after this time period has finished, lapsed, and the closer that period of time, the lower the value of the condo and the harder to sell it, and so on and so on. So again, it's better to have that information in advance, and if this information is not provided, at least you'll have to ask something in writing that there is no servitudes, there is no other owners' rights attached. There is no hypothec, including legal hypothec, and so on and so on, and mortgage. So again, if the developer is serious, well organized, and diligent, those documents should be available. Maybe they will be just some standard, empty, just prepared by the notary who was engaged by the construction company, and they might be just not very much detailed, but even that will give you more information than the situation when you don't have such information, like at all. So this is what I wanted to add to our previous video. We'll probably continue this conversation about the preliminary contract and condos later, but that's it for today. Thank you and have a nice day.